Sometimes the people who seem to have the least are the ones who understand the most about what really matters. Life has a way of humbling those who think money can buy everything, especially when faced with a gift that can't be purchased at any price. When Victoria Blackwood saw a dirt-covered drifter approaching her prize bull during the most important rodeo of the year, she screamed at him to get away. But when he touched the 2,000-pound beast and it went perfectly still, she froze in shock. This mysterious cowboy knew something about bulls that even her expensive trainers didn't understand. What she didn't know was that Jake Morrison had once been the most gifted bull rider and trainer in the entire Southwest before he lost everything in a single tragic night and disappeared from the world he once dominated. Now he was back, and he would change her ranch and her heart in ways she never expected. But what had happened in Jake's past that made him vanish from the sport he loved? And why was he now working for minimum wage when he could command top dollar anywhere in the country? The Blackwood Ranch sprawled across 85,000 acres of prime Texas hill country, where oil derricks pumped liquid gold from the earth, and champion bulls grazed on grass more expensive than most people's grocery budgets. Victoria Blackwood stood on the elevated platform overlooking the private rodeo arena she had built for today's event, her manicured hands wrapped around a crystal glass of champagne, watching the most exclusive bull riding competition money could buy. At 42, Victoria had the kind of polished beauty that came from unlimited resources and careful maintenance. Her auburn hair was swept into an elegant chignon that had cost more than most people made in a week, and her emerald green eyes held the sharp calculation of someone who had never met a problem that couldn't be solved with enough money. The designer Western wear she favored cost thousands of dollars, but had never seen a day of real ranch work. The Blackwood Ranch had been in her family for 4 generations, built on oil money and expanded through shrewd investments and ruthless business practices. Victoria had inherited it all when her father died 5 years ago, along with his philosophy that everything and everyone had a price. The ranch employed over 200 people year-round, from oil field workers to cattle hands to the small army of domestic staff who maintained the 15,000-square-foot main house. But today was special. Today was the inaugural Blackwood Invitational, a private bull riding competition featuring the most expensive bulls and highest-paid riders in the sport. Victoria had spent over $2 million organizing this event, flying in bulls from champion bloodlines, hiring Olympic-level trainers, and inviting the wealthiest ranch owners from across Texas to witness what she promised would be the most spectacular rodeo event of the decade. The centerpiece of her collection was Diablo Negro, a massive black Brahma bull that had cost her $750,000 at auction. The animal was legendary in rodeo circles, 18 hands high, 2,400 pounds of pure muscle and fury, with a bucking record that had sent more than 30 professional riders to the hospital. He had never been successfully ridden for the full 8 seconds, and Victoria was offering a $1 million prize to anyone who could accomplish the feat. "Ladies and gentlemen," the announcer's voice boomed across the arena, "please welcome our first challenger, 3-time world champion rider Marcus Sterling, attempting to ride the undefeated Diablo Negro." Victoria smiled with satisfaction as she watched Sterling, whom she was paying $100,000 just to attempt the ride, climb into the chute. Everything was going according to plan. The wealthy spectators in the VIP section were impressed. The media was covering every moment, and by the end of the day, the Blackwood name would be synonymous with the pinnacle of rodeo excellence. That's when she noticed the stranger. He was standing by the fence near the bullpens, maybe 50 yards from where Diablo Negro was being prepared for the ride. Even from a distance, Victoria could see that he didn't belong there. His clothes were clean but worn, faded jeans with patches at the knees, a blue work shirt that had seen better days, and boots that were scuffed from years of hard use. A dusty black hat sat low on his head, casting shadows across a face weathered by sun and hardship. "Security!" Victoria called to the nearest guard, her voice sharp with irritation. "There's an unauthorized person near the bullpens. Have him removed immediately." But even as she spoke, something was happening that made her words die in her throat. Diablo Negro, who had been agitated and dangerous all morning, snorting and pawing at the ground as handlers tried to prepare him, had suddenly gone completely still. The massive bull was looking directly at the stranger, his ears pricked forward with interest rather than aggression. The stranger stepped closer to the fence, and Victoria watched in amazement as he extended his hand toward the bull. Diablo Negro, who had attacked 3 handlers just hours earlier, stretched his massive neck over the rail and allowed the man to stroke his forehead with gentle familiarity. "That's impossible," Victoria whispered to herself, but it was happening right in front of her. The bull, who had been deemed too dangerous to approach without protective gear, was standing perfectly calm under the touch of a man who looked like he couldn't afford a decent meal. The professional handlers who had been struggling with Diablo Negro all morning were now staring in disbelief as the animal that had terrorized them responded to this stranger like a gentle pet. Victoria's security guard had reached the fence and was preparing to escort the intruder away when she held up her hand to stop him. She needed to see what would happen next, needed to understand how a homeless-looking drifter could accomplish what her expensive trainers could not. In the arena, Marcus Sterling was having trouble with his own mount, a smaller but still formidable bull that was refusing to cooperate with the starting procedures. The delay was causing murmurs of concern among the wealthy spectators who had paid premium prices for this exclusive event. But Victoria's attention was entirely focused on the scene by the bullpens. The stranger had climbed over the fence and was now standing directly beside Diablo Negro, running his hands along the animal's massive neck and sides. The bull, who had injured a professional handler just that morning, stood perfectly still, his eyes half closed in what could only be described as contentment. "Who is that man?" Victoria demanded of her ranch foreman, a veteran cowboy named Buck Henderson who had worked for her father for 20 years. Buck squinted at the stranger, his weathered face creasing with concentration. "Don't rightly know, Miss Victoria. He showed up this morning asking about work. Said he had experience with bulls, but—" Buck's voice trailed off as he watched the impossible scene unfolding before them. "But what?" "But look at him. He looks like he ain't had a decent meal in weeks. Figured he was just another drifter looking for handouts." Victoria's mind was racing. If this man could handle Diablo Negro with such ease, he possessed skills worth far more than his appearance suggested. In the cutthroat world of professional rodeo, animal handling expertise of this caliber was priceless. "What's your name?" she called out as she approached the bullpen, her designer boots clicking on the wooden walkway. The stranger looked up, and Victoria got her first clear look at his face. He was probably in his mid-30s, with the kind of rugged features that spoke of years spent outdoors. His dark eyes held a depth that suggested experiences far beyond his apparent circumstances, and there was something in his expression, a wariness, a sadness, that made Victoria think he was carrying invisible wounds. "Jake Morrison, ma'am," he replied, his voice quiet but respectful. He touched the brim of his hat in a gesture that spoke of old-fashioned manners rarely seen in Victoria's wealthy social circle. "Mr. Morrison?" Victoria said, struggling to keep the amazement out of her voice. "Do you have experience with bulls?" "Some," Jake replied with the kind of understatement that told Victoria more than a lengthy explanation would have. Men who truly understood bulls didn't boast about it. They let their work speak for itself. In the arena, Marcus Sterling was still having difficulties with his mount, and the delay was beginning to embarrass Victoria in front of her high-paying guests. She made a decision that surprised even herself. "Mr. Morrison," she said, her voice carrying the authority that came with unlimited wealth and power. "I'd like to offer you a job. Temporary for today's event. Help us manage the bulls, and I'll pay you $1,000 cash." Jake's eyebrows rose slightly. Clearly, $1,000 was significant money to him. But he glanced at the wealthy spectators in the VIP section, then at the elaborate setup of the arena, and Victoria saw something in his expression that looked almost like reluctance. "I appreciate the offer, ma'am," Jake said carefully, "but I'm not sure I'm what you're looking for." "Right now, you're exactly what I'm looking for," Victoria replied firmly. "That bull hasn't let anyone near him all morning except you." Jake looked at Diablo Negro, who was still standing calmly under his touch, then back at Victoria. There was something in his eyes that suggested he was wrestling with more than just the employment decision. "All right," he said finally. "I'll help out for the day." As Jake began working with the bulls, preparing them for the various events, Victoria found herself watching him with growing fascination. He moved with the kind of quiet confidence that came from years of experience, anticipating the animals' behavior before they acted, communicating with them in ways that seemed almost supernatural. More importantly, under Jake's management, the bulls were performing better than they ever had. Diablo Negro, who had been a source of constant problems, was now cooperating with the starting procedures like a seasoned professional. Victoria realized she was witnessing something rare, genuine expertise that couldn't be bought or taught, only earned through years of dedication and natural talent. But if Jake Morrison possessed such valuable skills, why was he dressed like a homeless drifter, and why had he been looking for minimum wage work? As the afternoon progressed and Jake continued to work miracles with the bulls, Victoria began to suspect that there was much more to this mysterious cowboy than met the eye, and she was determined to find out what secrets he was hiding. As the afternoon wore on, Jake Morrison's reputation spread through the Blackwood Invitational like wildfire. Word traveled quickly among the professional riders and trainers that a mysterious stranger was handling bulls that had terrorized seasoned professionals all morning. Victoria watched from her elevated platform as cowboys and ranch hands began gathering around the bullpens just to witness Jake's extraordinary abilities. "That man's got some kind of magic touch," she overheard Marcus Sterling tell another rider. "I've been working with bulls for 15 years, and I've never seen anything like it." Victoria's chest swelled with a mixture of pride and possessiveness. She had discovered this diamond in the rough, and his success was reflecting well on her judgment. But beneath the satisfaction was a growing curiosity that bordered on obsession. Who was Jake Morrison? And how had someone with such incredible talent ended up looking for day work at her ranch? The first real test came when it was time to prepare Thunderstrike, a notorious bull that had hospitalized 2 riders in his last 3 outings. The animal was known for his unpredictable temperament and violent reactions to any attempt at handling. Victoria's regular crew had been dreading this moment all day. "Ma'am?" Buck Henderson approached Victoria's platform, his weathered face creased with concern. "Thunderstrike's up next, and the boys are asking if maybe we should skip him for today. He put Jimmy Rodriguez in the hospital last month, and he's been particularly ornery this week." Victoria was about to agree when she noticed Jake approaching Thunderstrike's pen with the same calm confidence he had shown with Diablo Negro. The massive gray bull was snorting and pawing the ground, his eyes rolling white with agitation. The professional handlers were keeping their distance, unwilling to risk injury. But Jake simply stood by the fence, speaking in low, rhythmic tones that carried across the arena despite their quiet volume. Thunderstrike's ears flicked forward, and gradually, the bull's aggressive posturing began to subside. "Ladies and gentlemen," Victoria found herself saying into her microphone, "we're about to witness something unprecedented. Our newest team member is going to demonstrate proper bull handling techniques with Thunderstrike, one of the most dangerous animals in professional rodeo." The crowd in the VIP section leaned forward with interest. These were people who had paid premium prices to see something extraordinary, and Victoria was determined to give them their money's worth. Jake opened the gate and stepped into the pen with Thunderstrike. The bull, who had been a source of terror for professional handlers all season, allowed Jake to approach without so much as a threatening snort. Within minutes, Jake had the animal calm and ready for the next rider. The demonstration was so impressive that even the most jaded professional cowboys in attendance began applauding spontaneously. Victoria felt her heart racing with excitement and something else she couldn't quite identify. Pride? Admiration? Whatever it was, Jake Morrison was making her look like a genius for hiring him. If this incredible story of hidden talent triumphing over wealth and prejudice is keeping you captivated, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more amazing true stories that will restore your faith in the power of authentic skill over artificial status. As the day progressed, Jake's legend continued to grow. Bull after bull that had given the professional crew trouble all morning became docile and cooperative under his care. The wealthy spectators were getting the show they had paid for, and Victoria was basking in the reflected glory of her brilliant decision to hire this mysterious stranger. But it was the incident with Diablo Negro that truly revealed the depth of Jake's abilities and set up the confrontation that would change everything. The $1 million challenge had been the centerpiece of Victoria's event. Diablo Negro had never been successfully ridden for 8 seconds, and she had offered a fortune to anyone who could accomplish the feat. Marcus Sterling had been thrown in less than 3 seconds, as had the next 2 professional riders who attempted the challenge. "I don't think it can be done," Sterling admitted to Victoria as he nursed a bruised shoulder. "That bull's just too smart, too strong. He knows every trick in the book." Victoria was beginning to worry that her signature event would end in failure, embarrassing her in front of the most important ranchers and oil executives in Texas. The $1 million prize was supposed to generate publicity and establish her reputation as a serious player in the rodeo world. Instead, it was becoming a public demonstration that money couldn't buy victory. That's when Jake Morrison did something that left everyone speechless. He approached Victoria's platform during a break between riders, his hat in his hands and his expression respectful but determined. "Ma'am," he said quietly, "if you're willing, I'd like to try riding Diablo Negro." Victoria's first instinct was to laugh. This man who looked like he couldn't afford a decent meal wanted to attempt what 3 professional champions had failed to accomplish? But then she remembered how he had handled every bull throughout the day, how he had made the impossible look effortless. "Mr. Morrison," she said carefully, "that's a very dangerous animal. He sent more than 30 riders to the hospital." "Yes, ma'am, I understand that." Jake's voice was steady, but Victoria could see something in his eyes, not just confidence, but a kind of quiet determination that suggested this was about more than money. "Have you ever ridden professionally?" Victoria asked. Jake hesitated for just a moment, and in that hesitation, Victoria sensed there was a story he wasn't telling. "I've had some experience," he said finally. The crowd had overheard the conversation, and murmurs of excitement were rippling through the VIP section. The wealthy spectators were intrigued by the idea of this mysterious cowboy attempting what their expensive professional riders had failed to achieve. "The prize is $1 million, Victoria said, testing his reaction. "I understand, ma'am." Victoria made a decision that surprised even herself. "All right, Mr. Morrison, if you want to try, you can try." As word spread that the mysterious bull handler was going to attempt the $1 million ride, the energy in the arena shifted dramatically. Cowboys and spectators alike gathered around the arena fence, sensing they were about to witness something special. Jake prepared for the ride with the same calm efficiency he had shown all day. He checked his gear methodically, spoke quietly to Diablo Negro for several minutes, and climbed into the chute with the confident movements of someone who had done this thousands of times before. Victoria found herself holding her breath as the gate opened and Diablo Negro exploded into the arena with Jake on his back. But instead of the violent, chaotic bucking that had characterized the bull's previous performances, this ride was different. It was still powerful, still dangerous, but there was something almost choreographed about the way Jake moved with the animal's rhythm. For 8 seconds that felt like an eternity, Jake stayed mounted while Diablo Negro displayed the full range of his abilities. When the buzzer sounded, indicating a successful ride, the arena erupted in cheers unlike anything Victoria had ever heard. Jake dismounted smoothly and walked away from Diablo Negro without so much as a backward glance, as if riding unrideable bulls was just another day at the office. The crowd was on its feet, and even the professional riders were applauding with genuine admiration. Victoria stared at Jake in amazement, her mind racing with implications. This man who had appeared at her ranch looking for day work had just accomplished something that was supposed to be impossible. He had earned $1 million in 8 seconds, more money than most people saw in a lifetime. But as she watched Jake's face, Victoria realized something that sent a chill down her spine. He didn't look surprised by his success. He didn't look excited about the money. He looked like a man who had just confirmed something he already knew. Who was Jake Morrison really? And if he could ride like that, why had he been looking for minimum wage work at her ranch? As the crowds cheered and the media rushed to capture interviews, Victoria realized that discovering Jake's talents had only deepened the mystery surrounding him. The man who had just won her $1 million challenge was harboring secrets that went far deeper than simple financial hardship, and Victoria Blackwood was determined to uncover every one of them. The photograph fell from Jake's shirt pocket when he bent to retrieve his hat after the $1 million ride. It landed face up in the arena dirt, and Victoria saw it before Jake could snatch it away. The image was faded but clear enough. A younger Jake standing beside a magnificent bull, both man and animal gleaming with championship ribbons and trophies. Behind them stood a crowd of thousands, and a banner that read, "National Bull Riding Championship, Jake Lightning Morrison, 3-time world champion." Jake's face went pale as he quickly pocketed the photograph, but the damage was done. Victoria had seen enough to know that the mysterious drifter who had just won her $1 million challenge was someone else entirely. "We need to talk," she said quietly, her voice carrying the authority that came with unlimited wealth and power. "My office. Now." Jake followed her across the ranch compound to the main house, his shoulders rigid with tension. The office was an impressive room lined with oil paintings and trophies spanning 3 generations of Blackwood family achievements. Victoria gestured to a leather chair across from her mahogany desk, but Jake remained standing. "Sit down, Mr. Morrison," Victoria said firmly. "Or should I say Jake Lightning Morrison, 3-time national bull riding champion?" Jake's jaw tightened, but he took the seat. For a long moment, they studied each other in silence. Finally, Victoria leaned back in her chair, her green eyes never leaving his face. "I remember reading about you," she said slowly. "Jake Morrison was supposed to be one of the greatest bull riders who ever lived. Won the national championship 3 years running, earned more prize money than anyone in the sport's history. And then..." She paused, watching his expression. "Then you disappeared. Completely vanished from professional rodeo about 4 years ago." 4 years, 2 months, and 16 days, Jake corrected quietly. "So why is a former world champion bull rider working day jobs and looking like he hasn't had a decent meal in weeks?" Jake's hands rested on his knees, and Victoria noticed the way his fingers trembled slightly, not from fear, but from something much deeper. When he finally spoke, his voice was rough with emotion. "Because Jake Lightning Morrison destroyed everything he touched, and some mistakes you can't come back from." The silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken pain. Victoria waited, knowing that pushing would only make him retreat further into himself. "There was an accident," Jake continued, his gaze fixed on a point somewhere beyond the window. 4 years ago, at the Dallas Championship. I was riding a bull called Tornado Alley, mean animal but nothing I hadn't handled before. Something went wrong during the ride." Victoria's breath caught as understanding began to dawn. She had heard about the Dallas incident, remembered reading about it in the industry papers. A tragic accident that had shaken the entire rodeo community. "The bull fell," she whispered. Jake's composure cracked for just a moment, his eyes closing as if he could shut out the memory. When he opened them again, they were filled with a pain so raw that Victoria felt it in her own chest. Tornado Alley went down hard during the dismount. Broke his neck, died instantly. But that wasn't the worst part. His voice broke on the last word. What was the worst part? There was a kid in the arena that day. 8-year-old boy named Tommy Patterson. He'd slipped under the barriers during the confusion after my ride, probably trying to get a closer look at the bulls. When Tornado Alley fell, the boy was right there. Victoria's hand flew to her mouth as the full horror of what Jake was telling her became clear. "I tried to reach him," Jake continued, his voice barely above a whisper. "Tried to pull him out of the way. But I was too late. The bull's body, Tommy was underneath when it came down. Did he? He lived. Barely. Spent 6 months in the hospital, had to learn to walk again. The doctor said he'd never be completely normal, that he'd always have problems with his motor skills, his coordination." Jake stood abruptly, pacing to the window that overlooked the arena where he had just performed his miracle ride. "The accident was ruled my fault. Investigators said I made an error during the dismount that caused the bull to lose his balance. Tommy's medical bills were in the hundreds of thousands. His family sued me for everything I had." Victoria began to understand the scope of what Jake had lost. "Your prize money, your endorsements, all of it. Every penny I'd ever earned went to Tommy's medical care, and it still wasn't enough. The kid needed specialized therapy, experimental treatments, equipment his insurance wouldn't cover. So you kept riding to pay for it?" Jake shook his head. "I tried to, but word gets around fast in the rodeo circuit. Nobody wanted to hire a rider who'd caused an accident like that. Sponsors dropped me, venues wouldn't book me. Even if they had, He trailed off, staring out at the bulls in the distance. "You couldn't ride anymore," Victoria finished quietly. "Every time I got on a bull, all I could see was Tommy lying under Tornado Alley. Every time I heard a crowd cheering, all I could hear were his parents screaming in the hospital waiting room. I froze up. Lost my nerve completely." Victoria absorbed this revelation, understanding now why Jake had seemed so familiar with rodeo operations, why he moved through her ranch with the easy confidence of someone who had been at the top of his profession. How long have you been like this? Drifting? Working odd jobs? About 3 years? I sold everything I owned to help pay Tommy's bills. My house, my truck, even my championship buckles. Been moving from ranch to ranch ever since, taking whatever work I could find. But today, with Diablo Negro, you rode perfectly. How? Jake turned back to face her, and Victoria saw the man he had been before the accident, confident, skilled, passionate about his craft. But that man was overlaid with shadows now, haunted by memories that wouldn't let him rest. I don't know, he admitted. Maybe it was because I needed the money so badly. Tommy's turning 13 next month, and he needs another surgery. His parents, they've been carrying this burden for 4 years, and I promised them I'd find a way to help. Victoria felt her heart constrict. The $1 million. Every penny of it will go to Tommy's medical fund. His parents don't even know I'm still trying to help. They told me to disappear. Said seeing me only reminded them of what happened to their son. Victoria stood and walked around the desk to stand near Jake. She was close enough to see the silver threading through his dark hair, the lines around his eyes that spoke of too many sleepless nights, carrying guilt that wasn't entirely his to bear. Jake, what happened to you and that boy was a tragic accident. You can't carry that guilt forever. Can I? Jake met her gaze, and Victoria saw the depth of his self-recrimination. I was the professional. I was supposed to know how to handle situations like that. Tommy Patterson was 8 years old, and he'll never be the same because I made a mistake. But you've spent 4 years sacrificing everything to help him. You've given up your career, your life, your future. When does that become enough? Jake was quiet for a long time, his gaze moving between Victoria's face and the view of the ranch beyond the window. I don't know if it ever does. Victoria made a decision that surprised even herself. Stay here. Work for me. Not just for a day, permanently. I'll pay you a real salary, give you a place to live, a chance to use your skills with something other than guilt driving you. Victoria, you don't understand. I'm not the man I used to be. What if I freeze up again? What if I make another mistake that hurts someone? What if you don't? Victoria stepped closer, close enough to see the pain and hope warring in his dark eyes. What if it's time to stop punishing yourself and start living again? Jake searched her face, looking for something. Pity, perhaps, or the kind of false sympathy he had probably encountered too often. Instead, he found genuine caring and something else that made his breath catch. I'd be working for you, he said carefully. You're my boss. That's all this could be. Victoria felt her cheeks warm, realizing that her feelings for this broken, honorable man had moved far beyond employer concern. Is that all you want it to be? Before Jake could answer, Buck Henderson's voice came through the office intercom. Miss Victoria, sorry to bother you, but there's a situation with the bulls. We need Jake out here. Victoria sighed, the moment broken but not forgotten. We'll continue this conversation later, she said. But Jake? I meant what I said about staying. Think about it. As they walked back toward the arena, Victoria realized that discovering Jake's secret had only made her more determined to help him heal. The man who had just won her $1 million challenge was worth far more than money could measure, and she was going to prove to him that he deserved a second chance at happiness, even if he didn't believe it himself. The phone call came 3 days after the Blackwood Invitational, while Jake was working in the main pasture with a group of young bulls that Victoria had purchased for her breeding program. He had accepted her offer to stay on permanently, though he was still wrestling with feelings he didn't think he deserved to have about his beautiful, generous employer. Jake, Victoria called from the main house, holding up her cell phone. There's someone on the line who wants to speak with you. Jake's stomach clenched with familiar anxiety. Very few people knew where to find him, and phone calls usually meant trouble or painful reminders of his past. He walked slowly toward the house, steeling himself for whatever news awaited. This is Jake Morrison, he said, taking the phone from Victoria's outstretched hand. Mr. Morrison, this is Dr. Sarah Patterson. I'm calling about my son, Tommy. Jake's knees nearly buckled. Dr. Patterson was Tommy's mother, a woman whose life he had shattered 4 years ago. He had tried to stay in contact with the family after the accident, desperate to help however he could, but they had eventually asked him to stop calling, saying that hearing from him only reopened wounds that were trying to heal. "Dr. Patterson," Jake managed, his voice barely above a whisper. "Is Tommy all right? Does he need another surgery?" "Jake," Dr. Patterson's voice was soft, filled with an emotion Jake couldn't identify. "We saw the news coverage of your ride at the Blackwood Ranch. We know about the $1 million. Jake's heart sank. The media attention from his victory had been extensive, and he had worried that the Patterson family would see it and think he was trying to profit from his past glory while their son continued to struggle. "Ma'am, I want you to know that every penny of that money is going toward Tommy's medical expenses. I have the check right here, and I can transfer it to his medical fund immediately." "Jake, stop," Dr. Patterson interrupted gently. "That's not why I'm calling." Jake fell silent, confused by the tone in her voice. "Tommy has been following your story," she continued. "He's been tracking down old videos of your rides, reading articles about your career. And Jake, he's been asking to meet you." The words hit Jake like a physical blow. For 4 years, he had carried the image of 8-year-old Tommy Patterson crushed beneath Tornado Alley, broken and hurt because of Jake's mistake. The thought of facing the boy he had failed was almost unbearable. "Dr. Patterson, I don't think that's a good idea. Seeing me might upset him, bring back bad memories." "Jake," she interrupted again. "Tommy doesn't blame you for what happened. He never has." The statement was so unexpected that Jake had to sit down on Victoria's porch steps. Victoria, who had been pretending to tend to her garden while obviously listening to every word, moved closer with concern written across her face. "Tommy knows it was an accident," Dr. Patterson continued. "He's always known that, but more than that, he's grateful to you." "Grateful?" Jake's voice cracked. "How could he possibly be grateful?" "Because you saved his life that day. The accident investigators got it wrong, Jake. We've always known they got it wrong." Jake's world tilted on its axis. "What do you mean?" Dr. Patterson's voice was steady, but emotional. "We had our own investigation done after the lawsuit was settled. We needed to understand exactly what happened for Tommy's sake, for closure. The independent investigators found evidence that the accident investigators missed." Jake gripped the phone tighter, his heart pounding. "Tornado Alley didn't fall because of anything you did during the dismount. The bull had suffered a massive brain aneurysm during the ride. It was a medical emergency that could have happened at any time. The fall wasn't your fault, Jake. It was completely unavoidable." The words echoed in Jake's head, but he couldn't quite process their meaning. "But the official report said..." "The official investigators made assumptions based on incomplete evidence. They were looking for human error because that's easier to understand than a freak medical event. But the necropsy results were clear. Tornado Alley was already dying when he went down." Jake felt tears streaming down his cheeks, 4 years of guilt and self-recrimination beginning to crack like ice in spring. "And Tommy knows this? We told him the truth when he was old enough to understand. Jake, our son has never blamed you for what happened. If anything, he's considered you his hero." "His hero?" Jake could. "When Tommy was lying under that bull, unconscious and barely breathing, you didn't hesitate. You threw yourself on top of him, used your own body to shield him from further. The paramedics said that if you hadn't protected him those first few seconds..." Victoria sat down beside Jake, her hand gently touching his shoulder as he struggled to absorb this revelation. "The lawsuit was our insurance company's decision, not ours. We were told it was the only way to ensure Tommy's medical bills would be covered. We never wanted to hurt you financially, Jake. We knew you were trying to help us." Jake was quiet for so long that Dr. Patterson spoke again. "Jake? Are you still there?" "I'm here," he whispered. "Tommy would like to meet you. He's 13 now, doing well in school despite his challenges. He's been following your story, and when he saw that you won that $1 million, he told us he wanted to thank you in person for everything you've done for our family." 2 hours later, Jake found himself driving Victoria's truck toward Dallas, with Victoria in the passenger seat insisting that he shouldn't face this reunion alone. The Patterson family lived in a modest suburban home with a ramp leading to the front door and playground equipment in the backyard designed for children with mobility challenges. Tommy Patterson answered the door himself, using forearm crutches but moving with surprising agility. He was tall for his 13 years, with bright eyes and a smile that reminded Jake immediately of the fearless 8-year-old who had slipped under the arena barriers to get closer to the Bulls. Mr. Morrison! Tommy's face lit up with genuine excitement. I can't believe you're really here! Jake knelt down to Tommy's eye level, his voice thick with emotion. Tommy, I am so sorry about what happened to you. I've carried that guilt every day for 4 years. Tommy's expression grew serious, and he looked directly into Jake's eyes with wisdom beyond his years. Mr. Morrison, what happened wasn't your fault, and even if it had been, you spent 4 years giving up everything to help me. That's not something a bad person does. Dr. Patterson appeared in the doorway, and Jake saw immediately where Tommy got his strength and grace. She was a small woman with kind eyes and the bearing of someone who had faced enormous challenges and emerged stronger. Thank you for coming, she said simply, and thank you for everything you've sacrificed for our family. We know about the house, the truck, the championship buckles you sold. We know you've been living hand to mouth to help pay Tommy's medical bills. Jake looked between mother and son, these remarkable people who had found forgiveness and gratitude where he had expected only blame and anger. I have something for you, Tommy said, disappearing into the house and returning with a carefully wrapped package. I saved up my allowance for 6 months to buy this. Inside the package was a silver belt buckle, not as elaborate as the championship buckles Jake had sold, but beautiful in its simplicity. Engraved on the front were the words True Champion, and on the back, to Jake Morrison. Thank you for showing me what courage really looks like. Your friend, Tommy Patterson. Jake's composure finally broke completely. 4 years of guilt, shame, and self-imposed exile dissolved in the face of this boy's forgiveness and gratitude. Victoria wrapped her arms around him as he wept, not caring that Tommy and his mother were watching this powerful man finally allow himself to grieve for everything he had lost and everything he had found. As the afternoon progressed, Jake learned about Tommy's life, his struggles and victories, his dreams of becoming a veterinarian, his collection of Jake's old riding videos. The boy who Jake had thought was broken by their encounter had instead been inspired by it, learning about resilience and second chances from watching how Jake had handled his fall from grace. There's something else, Dr. Patterson said as they prepared to leave. Tommy's medical team says he's strong enough now for the final surgery that could restore most of his mobility. The procedure is expensive, but with the money you've provided over the years, plus what you won at the Blackwood Ranch, we finally have enough. Jake felt his heart soar. When? Next month. And Jake? Tommy would like you to be there if you're willing. He says you're part of his family now. As they drove back to the Blackwood Ranch that evening, Jake felt like a different man than the one who had arrived at Victoria's gate just days earlier. The weight he had carried for 4 years was finally lifting, replaced by something he had forgotten how to feel. Hope. So, what happens now? Victoria asked as they pulled into the ranch driveway. Jake looked at this remarkable woman who had seen past his circumstances to the man he could be again. Now I try to be worthy of the second chance you've given me. And I hope that maybe someday you might be willing to take a chance on more than just my professional abilities. Victoria's smile was radiant. Jake Morrison, I've been waiting for you to ask me that question since the moment I watched you calm Diablo Negro with nothing but your voice and your heart. 6 months later, Jake Morrison stood in the Dallas hospital waiting room, wearing his new belt buckle and holding Victoria's hand as they waited for news about Tommy Patterson's surgery. In his pocket was a small velvet box containing his grandmother's engagement ring, waiting for the right moment to ask the woman who had restored his faith in himself to share the future he was finally brave enough to envision. The boy who had taught him about forgiveness was about to take his first steps without assistance in 5 years, and the man who had thought his story was over was discovering that sometimes the most beautiful chapters begin with the words, second chance. When the surgeon emerged with news that the operation had been a complete success, Jake felt the last piece of his broken life finally click into place. He was no longer running from his past. He was building toward a future filled with love, purpose, and the knowledge that sometimes the people who seem to have the least to offer are actually carrying the greatest gifts of all.